We're ready to start the next phase of the evening. Please, if you have a chance, take your seats, and we'll file people in from the interactive lobby area. So congratulations, you made it to the end of another colloquium. Hope it's been a good ride. And so once everybody's seated. All right, so here we go. So I'm Chris Roman, an assistant professor in oceanography and one of the coordinators of this year's Honors Colloquium, Are You Ready for the Future? And on behalf of my fellow coordinators, Judith Swift, director of the Coastal Institute, and a professor of communication studies. It's been a long day. And Peter Canoan, a professor in oceanography. We're happy you're here. So welcome to this. This is our final event in the series investigating new technologies and how they're going to affect our lives. But before we go any further, we want to introduce next year's colloquium. So I'm happy to introduce Rick McIntyre, director of the URI Honors Program, who will say a few words about next year's colloquium, which I'm sure you're anxiously waiting for.
Thanks, Chris. I have an umbrella that doesn't belong to me. So if you left an umbrella in the bathroom, I'll sell it back to you. I want to thank just a couple of people tonight. I want to thank all the deans of all the colleges who have supported this series and the series that we've run now for many years. I want to thank the provost, the other vice presidents who have also been supportive of us financially and in other ways. I want to thank the Graduate School of Oceanography and the Vedelson Foundation, who are our co-sponsors this year. And I especially want to thank our three coordinators, the lovely Peter Cornillan, the talented Chris Roman, and the very special Judith Swift. And please give them a nice round of applause. Judith, as much as anyone else in the honors program, has always been a force for trusting the students and turning the course over to the students. And they may fail, but they'll never learn how to succeed if you don't give them a chance. And so the dedication of this team, both to these Tuesday evenings and to the classroom, is really something that I appreciate very much. We're going to do this all again with a different topic next year. And that topic is healthcare change, politics, health, and money. And whether it's politics, health, and money, or health, politics, and money, I think we can argue about it. It's an election year next year. But I'd like to introduce the four coordinators for next year's series, and if you'll hold your applause until I introduce all of them. First, Professor Jeff Bratberg from the College of Pharmacy, Professor Mary Cloud from the College of Nursing, Professor Roger Lebrun from the College of the Environment and Life Sciences, and Professor Shala Yekta from the College of Nursing. Please give them a nice round of applause. They know not what they have done. That's a good thing. This is a topic that I've wanted to do for many, many years, and I feel like we really have the right team to have an excellent series. So join us here again next September. And let me reintroduce now Professor Chris Roman.
All right, so I'll just mention again our sponsors to make these lecture series possible: the J. Younger Vedelson Foundation, the URI Honors Program, and the Graduate School of Oceanography, and our sustaining sponsors who are listed behind me here. We also need to thank some other people, specifically the Classroom Media Services, who keep the lights on every week and help us quite a bit, and our audio-visual technical team, which has helped us graciously tonight with all the moving parts in tonight's production. We also want to thank Deb Gardner, the program coordinator of the URI Honors Program, who really does more than anybody could really ask of her to keep these events going off professionally and on time and on schedule. So Deb is not alone. She has an able-bodied assistant, Anna Blake, who also deserves mention. And you've been here a while, but one last time, we'll remind you to turn your cell phones off, make all your seating adjustments. For reference, there are exits in the back of the auditorium and on the sides of the stage here. And the restrooms are in the lobby and downstairs if you haven't already figured that out. So for tonight's event, the idea here was to show you the future. And specifically, that's the 56 students taking our Honors Colloquium course, which parallels this lecture series. So tonight, you'll be seeing their final projects. And the idea was pretty simple, really basically 3 steps. Think of a topic, form a group, and envision the future. Sounds easy enough. So we really have gone quite a way, and I think you'll be very impressed by the diversity of projects you see tonight. So since our students come from all over the university, from many different majors, we really didn't want to hand out topics. So we really let this be a completely self-selecting process. All the student groups were formed on their own. Their topics emerged on their own consensus. Really, we just acted as consultants through the semester to try to offer the best advice we could. But really, this was really, truly the students' work. So the last thing I should say before we get going is you have a form here. The back of this form, we're asking for some of your feedback. So what we'd like you to do on the top, if you've been to one or many more of these lectures, is give us your impression of the speakers. We've been compiling similar statistics in the class. After every speaker comes in, we've dedicated a good part of our class to getting a student's opinion. We're curious what you guys think. Since feedback is an integral part of the educational process, we will ask you to evaluate the presentations you've seen today, sort of these 3 basic questions. And was it thought-provoking? How prepared were the students? And how well presented do you think the material was? So we'll use these and really combine this with some other data that we've been collecting through the series. And since we're envisioning the future, the best part about this whole thing is that Peter, Judith, and I don't have to grade these projects till about 2030 when we see who had it right. So with that, not much further to say. We'll bring on our first group, The Rise of the Machines, and looking at the intersection of robotics and medical technology.
At what point in history did a doctor become more than a trusted and learned friend who visited and treated the ill?
My father tried to teach me human emotions. They are difficult.
Yeah, Spider-Man and Freeze in full effect.
I'm Marcus Welby.
Steve Kiley.
Did you ever consider general practice?
Yeah, I've considered it. I've also considered breaking my leg in 3 places and joining the Foreign Legion.
Well, sometimes doctors make mistakes. Anna, you have to try twice as hard to fix them.
New Tums Quick Pack. Dissolves instantly.
Morning, Miss Hanson. How are you today?
Not too bad, Doctor.
Okay, take it easy. Expecting any personal orders this week?
No.
Righto. Mr. Rogers, have you got your unemployment benefits, please? Right, well, can you write me a check?
What does this action signify? When you looked at the other human, what does it mean?
Every human being has an impact on another. Why don't we want that in a patient-doctor relationship?
I said something strange in my mind.
I'll be back.
Good evening. My name is Jason Bowman, and this evening we have the privilege of talking to you about the future of healthcare and technology. As you can see, issues about healthcare and technology have been on our minds and in the media for a long time now. But recently there's been a lot of debate, in particular, about healthcare. What should healthcare include? Who should get healthcare? How are we going to pay for healthcare? But perhaps a more fundamental question is, who's going to provide the healthcare? Right now in America, we have a crisis. We have a patient population in American healthcare that is growing exponentially every day.
At what point in history did it...
that is growing exponentially every day. This is driven partially by the over 10,000 baby boomers who are turning 65 each and every day. You know who you are. And those people are going to, as they grow older, need more and more health care. Also, we have a population of over 32 million American citizens who now have insurance thanks to health care reform. So we have a lot more patients, but at the same time, many organizations, such as the American Medical Association, predict that by the year 2025, the shortage of physicians and nurses in healthcare is going to be over 125,000 people. So, what is a potential solution for this? Some people suggest that we have robotics and computers that are becoming increasingly powerful. So perhaps we can somehow use those to fill the gaps left behind by human doctors and nurses. Now, this has the potential to drastically change the way healthcare looks in the future. For example, how many of you have seen a doctor or a nurse in the past year? Show of hands. Yeah, pretty much everybody. So now imagine what that interaction might look like in 30 years. Will that healthcare provider even be human? These are the kinds of issues that we attempted to research and discuss in our project. And tonight we're excited to share with you our findings about those questions, as well as to share with you our vision for the future of healthcare and technology. But before we can do that, we're faced with a little bit of a problem. You see, we're standing right here at a singular point called the present, and we're trying to talk accurately about what are things going to look like in 20 or 25 or 30 years from now. That's really hard to do because things, for example, in healthcare could get worse, or they could become better and more efficient and more powerful, or perhaps they're going to end up somewhere in between. How can you decide where we're going to actually go, or how can you discern or have an accurate conversation? One tool that you can use to help achieve this result is the concept of bounding. Now, bounding, as defined by Dr. Peter Schwartz in the second evening of the colloquium, so a couple months ago now, is the concept of trying to come up with limits for a topic of where you think you might be going in the best case or worst case scenarios. So, for example, a lower bounds is where do we think we might end up most conservatively. So that's sort of the bottom, the worst case scenario. And then the opposite is the upper bounds. That is, if everything goes perfectly and things advance exponentially, what is the best case or the most advanced scenario that we predict?
We have multimodal sensing. So for example, we'd have acoustic sensing, visual sensing, and MRIs on the spot. Besides that, you'd have personalized organs, personalized treatments, medications that's tailored specifically for each individual. Now, you've seen what we think of upper and lower bounds, and here are some experts' opinions.
At what point in history did a doctor become more than a trusted and learned friend who visited and treated the ill?
My father tried to teach me human emotions.
Assist us. It will never replace, but they will assist us in delivering health care.
Because computerization has changed the world we live in. And I had an opportunity and a privilege to follow one of our graduates around a few months ago. And I watched him use the electronic health record, and I was totally impressed and thought about how that made things so much easier than when I was a nurse, running around up at the desk with the secretary saying, "Where is Dr. Jones's order? I don't see that order." And it was at the bottom of the pile, whereas he could see them instantly.
I think what I'm excited about in general is the in situ sensing, meaning real-time sensing in your body. If you look at in robots, precision of motion, repeatability of motion, the ability to hold something steady, don't even have that argument with a robot. It's going to win, right? I don't think replacement's the right. I think augment is probably the better words, and robots will be great assistants. Right? Lots of conditions have common symptoms, right? And that's where splitting hairs and intangibles that a doctor may have or get the sense of are going to be hard to quantify.
It's not in a place where I'd imagine a robot gets to make the decision to do a surgery, or a robot gets to assess the need for.
Do you want to speak to a robot? I asked 2 patients about this today, and they said, hell no.
Because I think humans are too multidimensional and too irrational. There is the human empathy. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a patient comes in and says, my mother just died. What would the computer make of that?
What are you going to do? Patient going to trust you? So can a robot be trusted? It's human nature. So there's your cognitive level. Trust, intuition, and expertise.
The human-to-human interaction of helping a mother give birth is really integral. And the more you remove the nurses, the more you remove the actual healthcare providers from that situation, the less satisfied people are, the more alone women and families feel. And it's a very social time in somebody's life. It's kind of sad when technology gets relied upon.
We all have this problem of hubris, right? Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should.
The only thing actually raises some interesting points is the robot does something egregious and things do go terribly wrong. Whose fault is it? I think you're going to open up a sort of a Pandora's box.
We create something and then we have to catch up and say, oh, wait a minute, how are we going to use this thing?
Well, I think looking at where it can go, and if the error rates are low enough, and it seems successful enough, and there's a good fallback procedure, I think, the fallback procedure meaning there is a doctor or somebody can override this robot, in this situation, then I would be pretty happy with it.
Next 30 years? Maybe. Maybe. I have to see it. I have to see it.
So now we've seen a few professional perspectives about where we think the future of medicine and healthcare was going to be going. But we'd like to talk to you a little bit about our vision. So we already have been taught throughout the colloquium that technology is increasing at an exponential rate, and we really don't see this changing within the next 30 years. So where will it go? We think it's going to trend towards the upper bound. However, we don't think it's quite going to make it, and it's going to fall short. And there's a few reasons why we see why, and we call this the iced tea principle. So first we have intuition. So what is intuition? Intuition is that subconscious processing of information that allows us and doctors to go into a patient's room and look and say, something's just not right. What exactly is going on? Why isn't this patient getting better, even though it might not be quantifiable? Do we believe that robots will be able to do this within the next 30 years? To some degree, yes, but we don't think that they'll be able to compete with experts within the field today. After that, we have confidence. Confidence basically is trust, and will humans trust robots and machines to help with all of their healthcare needs within the next 30 years? So one example of this that kind of contends this idea is the idea of self-driven cars that are being created by Google right now. So what's the difference between trusting your life to an automated car and an automated robot for medicine or healthcare? The difference is that with automated cars, you're following set pathways, you're following roads, things that are concrete. Meanwhile, in healthcare, you've got very unique humans, very unique situations. And we don't believe and we don't foresee that humans will trust that machines and robots will be able to handle the different degree of uniqueness with humans. They won't be able to problem solve, and they won't be able to deal with out-of-the-box situations that medical care provides. Last, we have empathy. So will robots be able to connect with humans on a very deep emotional level? One example we see in healthcare with this every day is the idea of human touch and compassion in neonatal ICUs. So when parents go in and they see their children, they're told often to go talk to their children, go touch them, to help them constantly heal and rapidly recover. And this is something that we see constantly in healthcare, is that these infants do recover rapidly. They do recover much quicker. And it's something that isn't necessarily quantifiable and not something that robots can't necessarily provide. So all of these things lead us to our idea of T, which is team. How robots and humans will work together within the future. Robots will be very accurate and precise. Meanwhile, humans will still lead their three things, their intuition, their confidence, their empathy, to increase the quality of healthcare.
So in conclusion, we foresee a future in 30 years where humans are not replaced by robots, but rather robots join human doctors and nurses as part of a team, where the power and precision of robotics and technology combines with the intuition, the empathy, and the creativity of human doctors and nurses to ultimately provide better health care. Thank you. And I'm still up here. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep talking. But I have the pleasure of introducing the next group, group number 2, who is going to be presenting on a really fascinating topic. What will a presidential debate look like in the year 2030? And this actually, I think, segues really nicely from our topic, because the future of healthcare and technology and medicine depends very drastically in the future, as it does now, on politics. So the future of politics and policy and elected officials is going to affect my life and your lives in healthcare as well. So without further ado, warm round of applause for group number 2.
thank you for tuning in to tonight's coverage of the 2032 presidential debate between Jackson Hess and Mo Steeple, our candidates for the next presidential debate. Election.
Jackson Hess, the forefront of the Reformist Party, has a technology-driven plan for our country if elected president. He strongly believes in the rapid advancement and acceptance of technology that will lead to an improved economy, better social affairs within our country, and a greater independence of our nation.
Mo Steeple, the People's Party candidate, places a strong emphasis on human rights and using technology more conservatively. He believes careful considerations and regulations must be put into effect in order for technology to benefit all aspects of society without infringing upon our constitutional rights. In regards to the rapid pace of technological advancement in today's world, a pivotal issue being discussed tonight will be the creation of an organization that will help to regulate global technology use. The proposed Technology Regulation Union would be a group of countries meeting regularly to review potential repercussions of new technologies and discoveries. Whether or not the United States should join this union is a dividing issue between the candidates.
That's right. And with the new database technology, the Centralized Citizen Information Database, CCID, the government now has the ability to compile all available information from internet and cell phone usage, financial activity, television, media consumption, GPS location, as well as medical records, which includes genetic information. Now the candidates must decide the best way to regulate and protect this technology to ensure the rights and privacy of American citizens, as well as to protect the information from cyber terrorism. Another critical issue in tonight's debate will be the question of whether or not we should move forward with using genetic engineering, postnatal and prenatal development to enhance humans mentally and physically, now that the genetic disorders have been nearly eradicated.
Thank you. And now to our automated moderator who will be delivering questions to the candidates in tonight's debate.
For our first question tonight, the proposed formation of the Technology Regulation Union is being discussed at international summits this year to regulate the advancement of fields such as nanotechnology and 3D printing. Would you support the United States' participation in TRU? First, let's hear Jackson Hess.
Thank you. The United States of America were founded on the principles of freedom and equal opportunity. And as these new technologies are discovered daily, we cannot afford to have our opportunities for advancement and our scientists' creativity stifled by a group of countries that are overly cautious with their research regulation. These technologies are growing naturally at an exponential rate, and that is a rate that cannot afford to be stonewalled by a group of nations, each with their own ulterior motives. If we were to join such a union, our political ambitions and scientific freedom would be completely conjoined with that of the other nations and be a complete misrepresentation of our American citizens. Instead, we need to embrace these technologies, delicately study their potentials, and assume responsibility for their outcomes. If not, I'm afraid the fate of our country will lie out of our hands. However, if we can strategically and effectively utilize these technologies to our advantage, we will emerge as the world power and the model for a new technological revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Hess. Candidate Steeple, your thoughts?
In order to prevent the misuse of these advancing and dangerous technologies, it would be in the best interest of the United States to join with the Union to place global regulations on new and dangerous technologies. These regulations would benefit not only the United States, but humanity as a whole. By joining with other countries that share a unified goal of preventing the abuse of technologies, we can avoid the terrible consequences that can result as a result of advanced and of rapid advancing warfare technologies, and we can avoid countries who independently research and apply these new technologies to warfare, thus starting an arms race that would make that occurred during the Cold War look minor. By instead working with other countries to advance our technologies, we can ensure global equity in regards to technological advancement and ensure safety, well-being, and a shared prosperity for all humanity.
Some argue that giving the federal law enforcement agencies unrestricted access to the expansive amounts of information contained in the CCID in exchange for greater protection may be a violation of their fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. If elected, what regulations and protective measures, if any, would you place on governmental access to the CCID? I'll first direct this question to Candidate Hess.
You know, As we can all agree, some regulations are necessary in order to ensure information security. However, even more crucial is that our law enforcement officials have access to the CCID information they need in a timely manner in case of potential crime. For instance, local crime trends and flagged purchases of individuals need to be easily tracked to prevent these crimes before they happen. The capability for tracking suspicious internet behavior not only keeps your internet presence secure, but it protects your private information. And through use of the Cyber Command of the Pentagon, we could utilize the CCID database to prevent your personal information from being used as a vector for cyber terrorism, as we have seen all too often in our private industry. By having an automated system that scans data and only flags personal information for review if suspicious activity is detected, your privacy will be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson. Now I'll turn it over to Mo Stiebel.
Well, for once I find myself agreeing with Mr. Hess to some extent. The use of the CCID database can be extremely valuable. It has the potential to help prevent physical and cyber terrorism, find missing children, and help provide valuable evidence in the prosecution of violent criminals. However, a sensitive database such as the CCID carries the possibility for an absolute complete loss of personal privacy for all citizens involved in the database. It must be noted that access to this database without strong reasoning and approved search warrant is a violation of Americans' right to privacy. Through the CCID, undue information can be and has been obtained with questionable warrants. This is increasingly common and is something that, if elected, I will not tolerate. Numerous layers of encryption and protection from the Pentagon Cyber Command of the Pentagon will ensure, along with a much stricter set of laws regarding database access, that the leakage of medical, GPS, and other communication information is stopped. And the most crucial thing that we should remember with this database is the purpose of it is to benefit our citizens, not to deprive them of their fundamental human rights.
The American Society of Ethics has expressed great concerns over enhancing humans prenatally and claims that this would lead us to generating artificial humans. Do you think that the public should be allowed to purchase genetic upgrades for their future children? Your thoughts on this issue, candidate Hess?
These revolutionary methods in genetic engineering should absolutely be made available to all of our American citizens. Past success with genetic therapies has resulted in the ability to cure an abundance of genetic disorders. However, more recent work has finally allowed us to realize our potential to not only cure a genetic defect, but to enhance human intelligence and physical ability beyond that of the norm. And those with these modifications show no negative side effects and are performing higher on standardized tests of athleticism and intelligence. That being said, further implementation of this research could even lead to the manipulation of such character traits as heightened senses of creativity or even a lower tendency towards violence. However, we are not the only countries researching this technology, and if we do not act to fully accelerate our understanding and implementation of these methods, we will be leaving our future generations unequipped and incompetent to compete in a changing world.
Thank you. Your closing comments, candidate Stiebel?
In the last 20 years, our scientists have made significant improvements in ensuring that every baby is born healthy in our country. However, this has also included the near eradication of dangerous and debilitating genetic illnesses. This is undoubtedly a step forward for society. However, there are unknown and possibly extremely damaging repercussions for fundamentally altering the genome of humans. As a society, we must ask ourselves, is it ethical to change what it means to be human by augmenting the abilities of the human race, changing both physical characteristics as well as personality traits that once defined who we are? And we must also look at the social ramifications of an elite group of children being born with idealized physical traits and scientifically adapted personalities. This, to me, is reminiscent of Aldous Huxley's book, A Brave New World, in which genetic superiority of a small number of people led to a broken society, rife with classism and inequity. It is not ethical or beneficial for humanity as a whole for a certain affluent population to have access to these genetic upgrades. But before we can even consider this, extensive research over a long period of time is both necessary and would be demanded under my administration. Thus, I am hesitant about the possibility of accessing these genetic upgrades.
Thank you for your answers, candidates. This concludes tonight's debate.
Well, that was a provocative debate. It's now more clear than ever that the issues our elected presidents will face will be pivotal to the future of our nation, with the onset of rapidly advancing technologies and innovations.
Thanks. The final results from our online poll show an almost equal approval for each of the candidates. It looks like it will be up to our voters to decide which one is more ready for the future. Great.
Up next, we have a great presentation, a very comprehensive presentation on 3D printing. So stay tuned, everyone.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Al Shupp.
And my name is Aaron Del Judas, and tonight we're going to talk to you about 3D printing, which is a technology with amazing possibilities. It's used today to print out objects like this, which is a functional ball bearing that was printed out all in one go by URI's very own Bonsuk Cho. He's a professor here, and he used a 3D printer right on campus.
So let's talk about the history of 3D printing a little bit. No? Clicker's not working? Okay, there it goes. All right, so let's talk about how 3D printing works. Well, it starts off in a computer where you build a model. There we go. So you build a model of the object that you want to print out, and then the computer software, it takes thin slices of the object. The information is then sent to a printer where the object is printed out one layer at a time. It does this over and over again until the full object is printed out, and then you should have a full object. So we could, there we go. Okay, let's go one more, and we'll take a look at a little video of a 3D printer in action. Here they're going to print out a cylinder. And as you can see, it's laying down one layer at a time, building up the object. Okay. So we'll move on to the next slide. There we go. And we'll talk about the history of 3D printing. It began in 1984 with stereolithography and continues today with inkjet printing. So stereolithography begins with a UV photopolymer that's put down in a thin layer. A laser then cures the polymer. The next layer is put down, and then it's so on and so forth until the object's printed. So next up was fused deposition modeling, which was invented in 1986, and instead of using a photopolymer, this uses a plastic pushed through extruder nozzles. The same principle of layer-by-layer construction still applies, though. Laser sintering came next in 1992, and this uses a carbon dioxide laser to fuse powder particles together. The powder can be anything from plastics to stainless steel, but still you need to do it one layer at a time. Inkjet technology is what most of you will find in your desktop printers today, and it's currently a 2D technology, but with a little bit of modification, it becomes a 3D technology. So Dr. Anthony Atala, who was a previous speaker at these lecture series, is using this to print organs, and right now I want to show you a video of printing a heart. Great, so if we can move on.
All right, so modern 3D printing is divided into two categories: rapid prototyping, which is used to create objects just like this, and bioprinting, which we just saw. All right, but since this talk is mainly focusing on the future, let's look at what we think we'll be able to do with this technology in 10 years. We think rapid prototyping is going to turn into rapid manufacturing. So instead of going to a big box store, you'll go to your town's local 3D printing store and have whatever you need customized and printed out for you right on the spot. Now, if you have any questions about this, consider this violin, which was successfully printed and assembled, and it was modeled after a Stradivarius, which is considered one of the world's rarest violins. And if you have any questions about this business model, consider Dell Computers, which, whose success is largely based on their revolutionary business model, which cuts out inventory and links suppliers to consumers, and everything is produced on demand, creating a leaner and more profitable business.
So now I'll discuss variable density concrete, and researchers at MIT are working on this technique right now. If you move to the next slide, you'll see that the outside of the concrete is very dense, whereas the inside is more porous. Now, for the anatomists in the room, you'll notice that looks very similar to bone, where the outside is dense and the inside is not as dense. And this is an example of scientists borrowing from nature's designs to create materials that are both strong and lightweight. But it doesn't stop with engineering. It continues on into medical and pharmaceutical applications.
Okay, so today Anthony Atala is working on printing more complex organs. And he believes that someday we'll be able to print directly onto a patient's skin. So this next slide, it's a picture of an ear that he's growing in his lab that he's going to have to reattach to a patient. But he believes that in the future, we'll be able to print directly onto patients, dramatically reducing recovery and treatment time.
So let's talk about pharmaceuticals for a little bit. So right now, when you want to make a tablet, you take a relatively small amount of active ingredient and combine it with binders so that you can make a tablet and give the drug orally. Now, how is 3D printing going to change this? Well, imagine if you could take a bunch of medications and print them all into one pill. What that would do is it would increase adherence to treatment plans, it would decrease the number of pills patients have to take, and it would increase the dosage accuracy for each drug.
Now, we'll also see the availability of bioprinted food. We have something similar to this today called in vitro meat, which is not bioprinted, but it is grown in a lab. Now, as bioprinting becomes cheaper, we'll be able to more efficiently produce meat in labs than growing it on a farm. Now, a lot of people have a very idealized sense of the meat industry, as you can see on the next slide. But unfortunately, that's not the case. It's a very inhumane and unhygienic process that with 3D printing, we won't have to subject animals to this. Now, that will dramatically reduce pollution caused by farm runoff, methane, and harmful chemicals used in the farming process, and we'll be able to produce meat more efficiently and more sustainably. Now, with these new manufacturing capabilities, we're going to see a dramatic change in our economy. So, to give you an idea, here's a map of the world today. It looks a little unusual because each country is size-weighted by the number of shipping containers loaded and offloaded in that country. So as you can see, China is very big, and the US is very big, and the rest of the world is pretty small. Now, unfortunately, the majority of US shipping is in the form of imports from China, as you can see in the next graph. And it's been dramatically increasing over the last 25 years. Now, why do we import so much from China? It's because they can produce things on a large scale very cheaply. This is called economies of scale, and you can see it right in this graph. It shows you the relationship between cost on the vertical axis and production on the horizontal axis. As production increases, cost goes down. Now, this is all going to change with 3D printing because the essential cost of producing one good will be the same as producing 1,000. So we'll see that cost curves will flatten, and it won't pay to import things overseas anymore. So then with 3D printing, we think the world's going to look a little bit more like this, where local production is a factor of income, and wealthier nations like the United States will not have to import everything overseas. Now, we're going to see all that in the next 10 years. What about the next 20?
Okay, so let's talk about maybe printing buildings. Researchers in the UK right now are working on extrusion techniques to make concrete without the use of molds. So that's an okay solution, but the problem is that you still produce the concrete in one area and then assemble it in another. I think what's going to happen is we'll see on-site 3D printing, where the 3D printer is lined up in an array like this, and it creates the building. It decreases costs, increases design capabilities also. NASA is even looking at this technology to see if they can build a moon or a base on the moon. But it doesn't end with NASA scientists. Someday you'll have your own personal 3D printer. As costs decline and quality increases, you'll be able to print out anything from mugs to plates, maybe even ceramic knives, spare parts for your bicycle, or even toys.
Now, we think in the future, bioprinting is going to advance to the point we'll be able to print complete organisms. Right now, we can just print single cells, single organs. And as you can see on the next slide, that's going to be just the tip of the iceberg. In 20 years, if we expand out, we might even be able to print an entire human body. Now, with that said, now seems as good a time as any to bring up the ethics concerned with 3D printing. With rapid manufacturing, you have the ability to scan and essentially produce a replica of anything. So we're going to see a rise in intellectual property infringement and pirating of not just music and movies, but of essentially every consumer good. And bioprinting has a fair possibility to be pretty controversial. It's possible that a bioprinted human being will be more controversial than cloning. With cloning, an organism is grown cell by cell in a process very similar to nature, whereas with bioprinting, you could theoretically print a full-grown adult without the necessary social and language skills. And we've already seen health concerns with genetically modified food, and there are health risks associated with hormone-fed animals, so we could possibly see similar concerns arise with bioprinted food. And we've already seen how 3D printing is going to change the economy. And usually with any economic change driven by technology, we typically see what's called structural unemployment, which is when a technology makes a job or a skill obsolete, and then a whole slew of workers need to change their skills to find gainful employment. We saw that in the United States with manufacturing as computers came onto the scene. Just leave it right there. This thick gray line is a best fit line, and as you can see, manufacturing began to drop off with the introduction of automated computer systems, and it's not a very happy picture. But 3D printing is not going to be all that bad. We're going to see some great stuff by 2030.
So we can expect to see a dramatic change in the US-China relationship.
Local on-demand manufacturing.
Sustainable food production.
Mass customization, not mass production.
And superb medical and pharmaceutical advances.
And if you have any questions about the limitations of 3D printing, consider this next image, which is a Penrose triangle, a geometrically impossible shape, which was successfully printed out using a 3D printer recently this year. So if there's one thing you can take from this, in the future, 3D printing is going to make the impossible possible. That's all right. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, I'd like to introduce the next group that will deal with personal narratives. No. Can we try this again? Personal narratives. There we go. Okay, that's better. Personal narratives in the future, everybody. Let's welcome them to the stage.
Do you have one?
No.
Hello, everyone. If I asked everyone what you just saw, I would probably get a variety of answers. But all of these answers would all share the same underlying assumption that what you just saw was a story of something. But why would you assume that this was a story? After all, what you really saw was just a series of isolated events. Many of you probably noticed that these pictures were not even of the same people. So why do we gather these seemingly isolated events, such as these pictures, into cohesive stories? We do this because it creates meaning. Each photo is meaningful to us only because of its relationship to the others. And without this relationship, there is nothing left. This narrative creation does not only play a part in our connection to stories, but in our creation of our own personal identities. We weave our own personal narratives, our own stories, in order to create meaning out of the seemingly isolated events in our lives. The aim of this presentation, there we go. The aim of this presentation is to first describe what these personal narratives are, and then focus on how future technologies will affect these narratives. We think of personal narratives as a web, where our strongest beliefs and social values form the center of the web. These central beliefs and values are the foundation for the rest of the web, the rest of our personal identity. It is also important to note that we, as individuals, are always undergoing change, and so our narrative webs have to be malleable. Most of the changes to our narrative webs are small, for example, changing a soda preference. But there are some changes, however, that are quite dramatic. If someone had an epiphany that compromised one of their central beliefs, one of the key things that define them as a person, then every outer belief attached to the central belief would also be compromised. Losing a central belief can lead to an inability to have a meaningful connection with the things in your life. This narrative collapse is what we would like to focus on. So let us look at an example of what narrative collapse might look like. I have a good friend who grew up very religious. Not only was she of a certain religion, but so was her family, the community she belonged to, including her friends and the schools she went to. The virtues she admired, the occupations she wished to explore, and the life she saw for herself in the future were all grounded in this religion. But one day this person had an epiphany, one that caused her to challenge the fundamental nature of her belief. By making this change to just one central belief, she realized that almost everything about who she was no longer applicable to her. She felt distance from everyone and had to rewrite everything that she thought about herself, from what she was to what she wanted to be. This was too much for her. She broke down and fell into a deep depression. Now she was able to recover as she found enough meaning to grab onto. But she still refers to herself as being broken. Decades later, still broken. Many of you have probably experienced something similar to this. So how are future technologies relevant to these personal narratives? They're relevant because just like an epiphany about soda preference or an epiphany about the fundamental things you believe, they change us. We are about to face radically new technologies with the power to change us in fundamental ways. I will talk about just one of these technologies, a technology predicted and discussed by our previous speakers Ray Kurzweil, Peter Schwartz, and Werner Vinge. I'm going to talk about the human cloud. The human cloud results from the ability to directly connect to the minds of other human beings through the use of individual brain augmentations, such as brain chips. We already have the ability to control computers with just the power of our brains. Some of you might be aware of the techniques used in the medical field that give immobile patients the ability to answer questions by the ability to move a cursor on a screen by thinking up or down. Peter Schwartz believes that we will soon have the ability to use futuristic texting, where we could think of letters and words and then send those letters and words to other people. The second step, and the truly radical one predicted by our previous speakers, is the ability to interface our minds with our computers, to fully map out and understand the brain. With this understanding, we'd be able to communicate by sharing our brain states rather than our language. Rather than reading a book, you would simply download a symphony of neural activity. We could also transmit sense perceptions to one another. After all, what you feel or smell or hear are really just the results of electrochemical pulses. What kinds of technology will result from the integration of the mind and the computer, and how will these technologies change our narrative webs? One fundamental belief that will change is locality. What I mean by locality is where you exist. If I asked you where you are, you would probably say right here, you're in your head. Today, however, our body is our cage, and what sets us free is the integration of mind with computer. No longer will we have a set physical location. We will be able to enter cyberspace, other people's minds, and experience what they experience. Imagine this. I am currently experiencing an amazing waterfall, and I decide to send you all an invite to my experience of the waterfall. You accept, and you enter my mind through our technical augmentations. You are sent everything that I hear, everything that I smell and feel. Now, where are you when you're experiencing my waterfall through my point of view in my body? And do you think having this ability to enter my body might change how you view yourself? Another change brought by this technology will be the power of our intellect. Werner Vinge predicts that the computers of only 20 to 30 years in the future will be so powerful that a discussion between a future computer and a current-day human would be like a current-day human talking to a goldfish. If we constantly upgrade the power of our personal implants, then we would be granted with abilities similar to these massively powerful computers. If you could download all of the knowledge of our species into your mind, do you think you might change your view of yourself? And finally, with the exponential growth of this technology, we will be continuously hit by better technologies that force ever more radical changes to our narrative webs. In order to maintain any sense of personal identity, we would have to be able to adapt to narrative collapses every year, then every month, then every hour. If we are constantly forced to change the fundamental nature of who we are our personal narratives even worth anything? Will you even attempt to repair your narrative web in a way that preserves your individuality if your fundamental self is in constant flux? So if the previous speakers are correct, and these technologies do come about, and they say we aren't far away, there are two things that could happen. The first possibility is that a new narrative web would emerge, one that puts you as one of many members of the human cloud. Your goal might be knowledge, your task to expand this knowledge, and your moral code the preservation of other cloud members and their intellectual contributions. The second possibility is the inability to adapt your personal narratives to these changes, resulting in the mass collapse of our narrative webs. You'll be left with a total disconnect with anything meaningful. You'll be left with completely passive, uncaring, and empty individuals whose only dream is for the ultimate absurdity of death to release them from their otherwise sad, vacuous existences. Our group thinks this is a thing to avoid, and pretty much every presenter we have had thus far has spoken of the need for a dialogue between society and scientists. In this dialogue, we're supposed to ask what the technology does, what features it will give us, and then ask, do we want these features? The human cloud might grant you wonderful features, wonderful abilities, but you have to consider how those abilities will change you. And while a dialogue between society and scientists is vitally important, perhaps more important is a dialogue within society about what kinds of things we value and what kinds of fundamental personal beliefs we are not willing to risk for the advancement of technology. Thank you. The next group will be explaining the results of a survey issued to URI students through a game of Jeopardy. Thank you. Good luck, sir.
This is Jeopardy! Here are today's contestants. This is Brian. Mi scusi. This is Brian, a real estate man from New York. He has just returned from 10 years in Africa with the Peace Corps. However, he's a bit behind the times, as you will soon find out. We are happy to have you with us tonight, Brian. Our next contestant is Joe from Orlando. He is a business consultant who has recently spent 3 years in South America helping a startup. His hobbies include watching PBS and trying to catch back up on things. Our last contestant is Eric from Boston. He is a financial consultant. His hobbies include attending colloquia, watching lectures, and reading up on the future. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Jeopardy! Tonight we are introducing a brand new category about the future. Instead of our usual routine categories about trivia, sports, weather, other mundane events, we are introducing a new theme about the future. Our categories today are as follows. We have overview of the future, scenarios, future technology, societal changes, battles of the future, and most importantly, why the future matters. All the data you will see during our presentation is from 300 students that we as a group interviewed. The red results are the least favorable, and green results are the most favorable, and yellow represents a middle ground. If the contestants are ready with the rules, and you are ready, we will begin. Brian, please pick a question.
I'll take overview of the future for 1 year.
This point represents the melding of humans and technology and will represent the birth of a new society.
What is artificial intelligence?
I'm sorry, that is incorrect.
What is the singularity?
That is correct. Please pick the next question.
Could I have overview of the future for 3 years, please?
Yes, you may. This theorem suggests a continued exponential growth in processing power.
What is Moore's law?
That is correct. Please pick the next question.
Can I have scenarios for 1 year, please?
Yes, you may. This scenario represents technology leading to a significantly improved future.
What is the heaven scenario?
That is correct.
Scenarios for 2 years.
In the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie series, The Terminator, this vision of the future is played out.
What is the hell scenario?
That is correct. You are doing very That is better.
Battles of the future for 2 years, please.
This type of war will not be fought physically, yet it could shut down entire countries instantly.
What is chemical warfare?
That is incorrect.
What is biological warfare?
Also incorrect.
What is cyber warfare?
Finally!
Battles of the future for 4 years, please.
The 2032 Olympic Games will have their competitors classified based on whether or not this technology has altered their genome.
What are steroids?
I'm sorry, Barry Bonds, that is incorrect.
What is genetic engineering?
That is correct. Please pick again.
Could I have societal changes for 1 year, please?
This involves a human judge in a natural language. This test involves a human judge in a natural language dialogue.
Could I have societal changes for 4 years?
Yes, you may. This is the state of moral being brought about by chips being installed on the brain and creating an issue of whether or not humans are still fully human.
What is neuroethics?
That is correct. You are doing very well tonight, Eric.
Could I have colloquium crazies for 2 years?
Yes, you may. This lecture series has gotten hundreds to thousands of people thinking about our lovely future.
What is the Honors Colloquium? Are you ready for the future?
That is beyond correct. You are doing very well tonight. Good evening, Eric. You've had a very good game. Would you mind telling me a little bit about what made it happen?
Thank you. Well, you know, I enjoy attending colloquia when I have the chance to. It's a great opportunity to learn a lot of things. I watch a lot of PBS.
Good.
A little bit of History Channel, Discovery Channel. I enjoy reading scientific journals and just kind of keeping up to date with new technology. I kind of figure it's like going to school and not studying for a test. You're not going to be prepared for the future when it comes around.
Excellent. That's a very good take-home piece of advice. Joe, would you mind telling me a little bit about what happened? You got off to a good start and then just collapsed.
Well, what I ended up realizing is that although I had some knowledge about the future, that when I was in South America for 3 years, I ended up losing the 3 years in South America. I didn't know what was going on around the world and what was being continued going on for the future. So what I realized is that I figured that not preparing for the future is I just need to stay up to date with everything. So thus I was behind not knowing about what was going on in the future and what was going on progressing. So what I know now is that to be prepared is not just knowing the basic concepts and ideas proposed about the future, but also need to stay on top of the new developments so I don't fall behind.
Excellent. Brian, you seemed a bit lost up there. Would you mind telling us what happened?
Well, 10 years is a long time, and I learned that. The big thing that I noticed was not only did I miss the technology and all the changes and just the news events that have happened, but think about all the social and other factors that happen and that all are secondary to that one thing. And not only that, but with that Moore's Law question, technology just keeps producing and keeps developing faster and faster and faster and faster. So 10 years now is just a huge change. It's so hard to overcome it. So really, I'm realizing I should probably know more about this.
Excellent. That was a very insightful point, Brian. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, not being prepared for the future is not an option. Our success will depend on that. And now we would like to continue and encourage you all to continue your studies, whether it be online or through other colloquia, to learn more about the future.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to break out from our Jeopardy game, and we're going to go more into our survey results of the 300 students from URI that we surveyed. So with our presentation of the game of Jeopardy, we wanted to demonstrate that in order to be prepared for the future, one has to be actively thinking about the future.
As Joe said, we surveyed about 300 students, all from the University of Rhode Island, on 2 different surveys, and we're looking to see if they knew about different theories, terms, and concepts that were all relative to the future.
What we found kind of surprised us. We found that most students at URI are not really thinking about the future. They don't really know much about the different technologies and different concerns that were exhibited in our questions. So that was kind of unexpected.
And as you can see by all this red on the graph, most of our student body is not prepared, and that will need to change, or as a society and a nation, we will fall behind.
Now, how we integrated this data into our game, we based our questions in the game based on the survey results. So here's an example question about Moore's Law. This theorem suggests a continued exponential growth of processing power, and this was based off one of our questions that said, do you know what Moore's Law is? And here's the graph from our data. As you can see, 83% of the students that we surveyed do not know what Moore's Law is. And what we figured is that Moore's Law is thought of by many futurists and prominent future technology enthusiasts, such as Ray Kurzweil, Peter Schwartz, and Deb Roy, to be a prominent factor in shaping the future. So we figured that the community and our generation and all generations should know about it so they know how it could possibly impact our future.
This specific question, as well as others, such as the Turing test, which, just to take a step back with the Turing test, for those of you that aren't aware, the test is based around this idea that you can picture yourself like sitting at a computer typing a message, just like how now Facebook, everything else, it's all around that instant messaging type of thing. So there's a third-party judge, there's a human, and there's a computer. And what the judge has to do, essentially, is send IMs both to the human and then both to the computer with no idea which is which. And then if it's impossible for the judge to tell the difference between the human and the computer, it's said that the computer has passed the Turing test, which it's kind of crazy to think about now that that's actually possible, that computers could be confused with humans and vice versa, but it's actually beginning to happen. And this is backed up with other points that we had, such as when we surveyed everyone attending the colloquium, said 85% were not actually attending. When we saw this, we found that the majority of those who did not attend the colloquium did not also know about the Turing test or the singularity. For example, 88% of those who did not know about the Turing test and 80% of those who did not know about the singularity did not actually attend the colloquium. From this, we deduced that they were not thinking about the future and not prepared for it because they did not understand these important concepts. Because especially as our group discovered as we went through and discovered this project, was that all the different presentations we've had so far throughout the colloquium are all those subjects are considered drivers of the future. So it may not be 5 years or whatever, but eventually these are really the biggest things that are going to have the impact on our lives.
Going a little bit more into what we found from our survey is that when people were asked which factor they thought would most influence the future, they tended to side with the factor that most closely related to the major that they're in. And hopefully you guys have all had enough time to look at this now. The colors are a little bit different from all of the other graphs because this data was taken from our colloquium class. Our class is a little bit more prepared for the future than the general student body at URI because all of these responses, or nearly all of them, indicate that these students had a little bit more to know about the future because of a very much shorter time frame for the Turing test to become a reality with all computers.
Another interesting point that we found was that in our follow-up survey, all the students who decided that they would not accept synthetic organs are upperclassmen. Who knows? Maybe freshmen are a little more advanced.
The other night, late at night, when we were diving further into our data, we found that those who said that they would not genetically engineer their children actually would accept a synthetic organ.
We also discovered that the respondents who were more optimistic about the potential growth of technology in the future also tended to indicate that they would accept technology to expand their lifespan longer than it is now. And this happened about 30% more often than those who are actually pessimistic about the growth in the future.
Even though the data from our survey indicates that the URI student body isn't currently thinking about the future, there is still hope that those of us who go on to create what the future will become will be able to glean enough of this knowledge to make it a reality and make it a more positive future.
For example, 64% of our survey respondents believed that there is an optimistic hope for the future, With that said, we hope that that optimism becomes the impetus to learn more about the future. Thank you. Get them on.
Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, I will give you some food for thought. Excuse me.
Did your interview go well?
Non, en fait, je suis tombée dans les pommes.
I don't understand. Why were there apples?
Lorsque j'ai fini le déjeuner, je suis tombée dans les pommes. J'avais mal au cœur.
Oh my God, you tripped over a pile of apples after lunch? I would be depressed too. Did anyone see you?
Oui, tout le monde m'a vu. Oh, la vache.
The cow? What cow?
La vache, la poisse, elle a détruit ma journée.
But I thought it was the apples and not a cow.
The skit you just saw demonstrates the current problems in translation technologies of today. Freetranslation.com, the website used in this translation, led both of these speakers to great confusion. However, we feel that translation technologies have actually made great leaps and bounds towards being able to translate at the level of human translation. We feel that by the year 2030, that will be successful.
To better understand the problems with translation technology and how we're dealing with them, we have to know a little bit